Game of Thrones. What can be said that hasn't already been said about the year 2020? There was so much promise and hope, but it all turned out to be one dumpster fire after the other. To be clear, I was one of the biggest Game of Thrones fan on the planet. Here's a beer stein that I won at Game of Thrones trivia. Here's some pictures of me in cosplay. Here's my Game of Thrones themed birthday party. Those house banners still decorate the halls of my house, by the way. Never has a story and characters so thoroughly enraptured me before, because like everyone else, I thought it was going somewhere. Somewhere new and interesting and meaningful. The early signs pointed to a modern, novel take on fantasy and fantasy tropes. But oh no, it wasn't any of those things after all. Now that where I'm coming from is established, why am I making this video? There are already dozens of takedowns of Season 8 on YouTube, some of them over an hour long. What could I possibly add to this discussion? And this is to take nothing away from those. They're great. I especially love Lindsay Ellis's feature-length video essay. If you haven't watched it, stop now, go watch it. I'll put a link. I can't recommend it enough, but it is feature-length, so, pop some popcorn. But there's one aspect I personally haven't seen addressed much in all these criticisms, and I'm still super salty about the ending of Game of Thrones. I am the salt. And the more I think about it, the angrier I get. And that's just kind of why I'm throwing this video out there, because I just have to get it off my chest, let the world know just how disappointing it was. So the thing that really bothers me about how the TV show ending is not just how it was rushed, which it was, and that is by far the biggest complaint in the other critiques of Seasons 7 and 8 that I've seen. My biggest qualm is this. If Martin sticks to his guns, as he's claimed that he will do in interviews, what in the world was the point? Was it all sound and fury signifying nothing? Just a popcorn modern update of Lord of the Rings? Or could it be something even worse? A bad message? Something the world did not need right now, or ever needed? For this video, I'm assuming that D&D at good old HBO knew Martin's ending and followed through with at least the major points of it. All signs seem to point to that, so that's what I'm assuming going forward. Things may change in the future, and I hope they do. Let's break it down. Storytelling has two arcs: story arcs and character arcs. You can have a great story without a good arc, as long as it's made with amazing characters. Star Trek Next Generation is probably my favorite example of this. It has almost no arc, no central story. It just has amazing characters thrown into various situations each week, and you tuned in for those characters. You can also have a great story with so-so characters if the premise is intriguing enough. There are very few characters I love or even remember from Black Mirror episodes, San Junipero aside. But many of those stories are just amazing. We won't talk about Season 5. That's maybe another video altogether. Point being, some of my favorite stories are just great characters interacting while nothing much of consequence actually happens. Richard Linklater's Before trilogy is largely just two characters talking. There's 2 or 3 actual plot points in each. In the first, Jesse and Celine meet, and then big things happen towards the end, but the story doesn't really have an arc. The characters don't really change either, at least in the first film. It's just about these two people interacting. That's it. But they're amazing. But that's definitely the exception. I don't think it's controversial to say that the vast majority of good stories have both a story arc and a character arc or arcs. And in an epic, as long as A Song of Ice and Fire, that is not episodic and tells a continuous story, unlike, say, Next Gen, you want to have an arc. You need an arc. You need things to happen of consequence. Otherwise, it's just the Wheel of Time. Apologies for the shade, Jordan fans. So my thesis is simply this. If A Song of Ice and Fire ends the way that the show ends, nothing really happens. Hyperbole, sure. But let's think about it. Let's start with the story arc. When it begins, Westeros is at peace. It has minimal contact with Essos, there's a Stark in Winterfell, the Targaryens have been overthrown by a North-aligned faction, the aristocracy controls the power in the land, dragons are gone, magic is fading, and the ice zombies don't really mean anything. When it ends, all those things are still true. Westeros is at peace, minimal contact with Essos, Stark in Winterfell, last Targaryen, overthrown by the North, Aristocracy controls the power on the land, dragons are gone, magic is fading, ice zombies still don't mean anything. And, well, they're dead. The North is independent, sure, so that's something. But is it really that much more independent than it already was? All the kingdoms were already independent in nature, having separate and distinct cultures, no loyalty to one another, particularly the North and the Iron Islands. They all just pay lip service and taxes to King's Landing, and I'm sure at some point the remaining United Kingdoms will take the North back by force, or the North will just rejoin for its own benefit. So, geopolitical consequences in this fantasy epic are basically static. There's no vanquishing of Sauron, there's no huge upheaval in the political structure. Everything's like pretty much the same. Except for bloody Bronn taking over the Reach for reasons. Which is a change, but not really a good one, and doesn't really make any sense, except to get a joke of Bronn being Master of Coin, even though he knows nothing about coin. Ha, hilarious. Great job, HBO. But what about everything else in the story? What about the others? The White Walkers, as they're known in the show. Is there anything more anticlimactic in all of fiction than this plot? Seriously, is there? All of fiction. Let me know in the comments below. I'm throwing the gauntlet down on this because I can't think of one, or even one that comes close. You presumably spend 6.5 long novels and 7.5 TV seasons building up a threat that's basically a monster of the week in actual power. Not to mention, it used the kill the main big bag and all the drones die cliche. It's terrible, it's lazy, overused. I hope that's not how it really ends. And even in the final conflict, they don't do any really damage other than kill a couple of secondary characters. Is Martin really going to change that in the Battle of Winterfell? Is like Sansa going to die or something? It seems very unlikely. We're told over and over again that these White Walkers are the real threat. They didn't do anything. They couldn't even take rickety old Winterfell, much less invade Westeros. And Dany still has a huge army after it's over. What was even the point of all this long hype and build-up? I thought Martin was building upon what Tolkien started, and he couldn't even manage to make a better antagonist. The Night King is Bargain bin Sauron, and Cersei is Bargain bin Saruman. So what is the real threat in the series then? What are the stakes? You have Cersei, who gets drunk for the last 2 seasons and then is killed unceremoniously by the ceiling. And then there's Dany. We'll get to Dany. But like Martin does with everything terrible in his story, we'll save her for the end. The story doesn't have much of an arc or a worthwhile antagonist to defeat, and that's all there is to it. But what about the characters? Well, there's great characters, right? It could just be about the characters. Good stories can be character-driven, but when you look at where these characters end up, you have to wonder, did they even really have character arcs? And unfortunately, upon further reflection, I think the characters are even more disappointing than the stock fantasy plot of A Song of Ice and Fire. Let's look at those character arcs, such as they are, and go through them one by one. We'll start with our boy, Jon Snow. I'm going to call him Jon Snow and not Aegon Targaryen, because that red herring right there is the main reason the character sucks. So much of his arc and so much of the entire series is built around his parentage and it mattering. And in the end, it matters not at all. Instead of being a contender for the throne, they literally just fridge him in the north because of his parentage, and it would shake things up too much in Westeros, even though he literally has no reason to stay there once the Unsullied go away to die by butterflies. And that's a thing, you can look that up. Even that whole parentage thing aside, though, he's pretty static. Like, he doesn't really learn anything. He doesn't really need to be there for much of the story to happen. He could have just been a brave leader of the Night's Watch to fight back against the White Walkers. He could have been Lord Mormont. Just have him not die and use the Night's Watch against the White Walkers in the ways that Jon did. Poor Jon is just kind of there, being your generic chosen one protagonist, except for, fake out by Martin, he kind of doesn't matter in the end, even though the Lord of Light resurrects him, Jesus style, to recapture Winterfell, I guess. Apparently, the Lord of Light really cares about northern Westerosi politics and who controls the North. I mean, guess you got us there, George. Didn't see that coming because it makes no sense. And that's the problem with the shocks that happen in the last part of this overall narrative. They don't make any sense. But wait, didn't Jon persuade Dany to help against the super ineffective ice zombies, and then kill her when she went all Dragon Hitler? Sure. Okay. I guess that was his purpose in the story, all along. To sleep with Dragon Hitler, to get her to help, and then kill her off after she dragon nukes the city for reasons. Thanks. Such a great and meaningful character. And if you remember, it's not even really an arc. Jon just kind of stumbles into most of this. I don't want it, being his favorite phrase. I can't do impressions, sorry. And in the end, he gets his wish. He doesn't get anything but an icy retirement in the fridge of the North after killing his aunt/lover. But sure, if you want to call that an arc, albeit a bad one, I might not disagree completely. He did go from an angsty bastard to an angsty heir that gets fridged. It's not exactly compelling stuff, but it's an arc, I guess. Something changed. But let's go to the other characters then. Cersei doesn't change. She's horrible from the drop. Martin says he humanized her because she cares for her kids. Yeah, what mother doesn't? I mean, sure, there's some that don't, but I'm sure the alien queen in Aliens cares about her kids too. That doesn't mean that she's humanized and I relate to the alien queen. But, I get it. I like Cersei as a character. She was a great character until the last 2 seasons. Mustache-twirling villains who never really develop or change or get humanized can be good if they are done well. And I think Cersei was done brilliantly. She's a better mustache-twirling villain than Sauron, who, was mostly just this dark lord in a tower that we don't really interact with or, get involved with. We get to know Cersei a lot and understand her motivations and things like that. And so she's a great character. Until the end, where she was useless for 2 seasons and dies to Deus Ex ceiling rubble. So, again, not really an arc, and just nothing really interesting happened with that character, which was a great character, but just, nothing happened. Arya. Yeah, I mean, she's completely static. She trains and gets better at killing, but she was on that path from the very beginning. She's just, an assassin. I don't know what other character traits I would even assign to her other than she's good at killing people and she's a little psychotic about it at times. She can be cold and ruthless, but these are all traits of an assassin. And then the Hound basically forces her to stop killing, and so now she's like, well, okay, I guess I'll change that and my life and my motivations, and I'll be an explorer because reasons. And also disappointing that she doesn't really use the techniques that she learns from the Faceless Men, except to kill Walder Frey in an admittedly cathartic 2-minute scene that I absolutely loved, but we spent so much time in Essos just for that little tidbit. Come on. If you're going to have her kill the White Walker, the Night King guy, have her use these techniques that she's been learning for all this time. The same goes for her sister Sansa. Sansa starts on a path of being a queen and ends up as a queen. But don't worry, Martin lets you know that getting raped made her strong. Yikes. Now, she might not actually get raped in the books, but the way they do it in the show is super problematic, and the speech that she gives about how it made her the person she is also wow. Did you think about this at all, D&D? Anyway, Tyrion. Oof. That is a character that has a definite arc, but wow, is it not a good one. He was a fan favorite, myself included, largely because he spends most of the series being witty and cunning, really someone you can empathize with and get behind. But at the end, he's just as drunk and useless as Cersei. He does nothing, he is nothing, he affects nothing. he just makes terrible decision after terrible decision that is completely the opposite to how his character was before. It's not like his character before he killed his father was not a drunk. He was still drinking all the time, but still using the old noggin. But I guess he convinces John to kill Dragon Hitler, but that's literally his only meaningful act for 2 or 3 seasons. Bran the Boring gets all sort of ambiguous powers and uses them to do important things like find out Jon's meaningless heritage, doesn't do anything in the Battle of Winterfell, and then gets made king at the end for no reason at all. So, I mean, he does have an arc, I guess. He stops talking after he gains the sight and all of that. But is that good? Does that make him a good king? What is even if this show? I suppose I like some of the secondary character arcs, like Brienne has a great arc. And I mean, that's one. Sam's arc's not bad, if a little predictable, but I mean, Brienne's arc is also kind of predictable, but predictable can still be good when well executed, you know? But let's go to the 2 worst defenders. You have Jaime Lannister. Wow, I hated that smug jerk from the drop. I was totally Team Stark in the beginning, and this guy was just the worst. And I generally hate people like him, but it was a character I loved to hate. It was an interesting character. And then he gets captured and humbled and basically becomes a totally different character. I actually end up liking him for most of the series. That's amazing. That's good storytelling, to go from my most loathed character to one of my favorites. Until the end, where he's like, actually, I really am terrible. I'm gonna go back to my sister. Awesome. Character ruined. For what? To prove that people are horrible? Yeah. Thanks, George. We couldn't have figured that out without Jaime's arc. Great. And then Daenerys Targaryen. Dany. Where do I begin? Don't want to really look at this through a feminist lens, just because I'm not qualified and there's already much better takes out there. Again, watch Lindsay Ellis's video. But I will say, it seems obviously problematic to have your female protagonist go crazy just because of her bloodline and her best friend dying and a rejection by her nephew. I thought we were past the days of thinking women were just all hysterical and overly emotional, even these world leaders like Dany was. But apparently Martin disagrees. If you look at the history of real war, though, roughly all of them were started by men, so are women rulers really the emotional ones, quick to anger and violence? But anyway, other people have said better things about that subject. Let's talk about her arc. Well, there's nothing in her character up to this point that hints that she would become Dragon Hitler. She's violent, vengeful, ruthless, but has she ever harmed innocents? The defenseless, women, children? No, the opposite. She has been guided all along by her desire to protect the defenseless, the citizens, the women, the children. Yes, at the end, she's isolated, betrayed, depressed, angry. That can definitely affect someone, make them do something out of character. But where is the logic or motivation behind taking out her rage on the very people she has sworn to protect over and over and over again? Cersei wronged her, as did Jon and many others, but not the people of King's Landing. But we get Dragon Hitler anyway, because reasons. George R.R. Martin told them that she was going to go crazy in the end, so I guess they had to do it, even though they didn't build it up at all or justify it at all. And that's not an arc. An arc is progression. You can chart it. You can make sense of it. No, what they did with Dany is just the ultimate gotcha. It's the same kind of thing Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi and upset so many fans, or M. Night Shyamalan did in his worst movies. A twist without any reason or justification or point, just came out of nowhere, just turning on a dime only for the shock value, no foreshadowing or rhyme or reason to it. And where does Jamie and Dany's meaningless arcs leave us? What is the message there? Well, if Martin sticks to his ending, A Song of Ice and Fire just sucks as a story, to be honest. The themes are that you can't deny your blood or your nature. You can't change. Jon does little of importance. It doesn't really change. Cersei is already evil. It stays evil. Tyrion goes from a smart drunk to a dumb drunk. And that's the entirety of his progression. Bran has ambiguous powers that he never uses for anything useful, and then becomes king for yet another pointless twist. Arya and Sansa don't change. They just fulfill the paths they were already on. And Jamie and Dany fail at their redemptive arcs, which could have been amazing arcs, but instead just they fail and become bad people again. Again, for no reason. What are you saying there? What is the theme of that? Like, maybe if one of them failed and the other one didn't, then you have a contrast, right? Then you could maybe say something like, people have agency and they can choose to be good or bad. But to have, like, these two people just fail and be like, the two people with the biggest character arcs, and they fail, and they, for no reason, what is to be learned by that? So, plot-wise, the things he spent so many thousands of words communicating that they matter, the White Walkers, Jon's parentage, the breaking of the wheel, the old gods and the new, none of it matters or goes anywhere. What are we left with? A static world, mostly static characters, and a depressing theme that people suck and can't ever change. And here's the thing. Everyone rails on the pacing, but most of the things I've mentioned in this video wouldn't be fixed if they had slowed things down in the show by a season or two. Dany's ending is still bad. Jamie's ending is still bad. Doesn't matter how much time you spend getting there, it's still going to be disappointing. You could be less surprising, because you could actually put some rhyme and reason to it, but I still don't think it's good storytelling to have both your big character arcs just end terribly. And the White Walkers still going to be a lame threat if all they do is not even get past Winterfell after all that build-up. Bran is still going to be a weird and bad choice to be king, even if he uses some powers in the Battle of Winterfell or something. I mean, there's still... I actually laughed when Tyrion's like, who has a better story than Bran the Broken? Pretty much everyone left in the show. Tyrion, and a lot of the dead ones, too. You have Jon and Tyrion, and their senseless arcs, and then don't get me wrong, I do generally think the pacing is terrible. Definitely exacerbated all of these problems. It made them feel even worse and out of place. In a way, I'm almost glad, because I don't think their badness would be so glaringly obvious if competent creators had told the story. But I don't think better pacing is some panacea for fixing this franchise if it sticks to the story that the show told. So what do I think should happen? I think Martin should change his ending. The entire last novel. Make the characters meaningful. Make the story meaningful. Otherwise, just like his show, the cultural relevance of these novels will be erased by the sheer nihilism of it all. And given the state of the world right now, my answer to that message is in the thumbnail of this video. WTF. Thanks for watching.